Welcome to Scary Stories. This episode is a full hour special, beginning with his all-new story entitled, Did We Photograph a Real Dogman? Sent to us by Roger in Milwaukee. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I've been thinking about sending you this story for a long time, but I wasn't sure that what I photographed was a dogman or not. It wasn't 12 feet tall, for one thing. I talked it over with my other friend who watches your channel. He told me that if it walked on its hind legs, then it was an upright walking canine, the kind that Linda Godfrey used to write about. So he helped me write this up for you, but you can consider it a first draft and fix our spelling, or English. Just please leave the facts and the names the way they are. I've gotten permission to use the real first names of the people involved, but not their last names. So please only refer to me as Roger when you write up your version. Now, I had thought I had lost this photo. It was taken on an old phone of mine, I guess around 2005 or 2006-ish. It might have been 2007 or 2008, as I didn't get my first smartphone until I think 2009. This photo was originally 640 by 480, which is very tiny by modern standards, but I have tried to enlarge and sharpen it for you. Feel free to do more if you know how. There's an interesting story behind it, but it doesn't take long to tell. For years, I thought it wasn't a dogman since it was so friendly with my coworker. After seeing some of your episodes over the past year, however, I have come around to the thinking that some dogmen are just soft, unhuman ladies. That might have been the case here. Let me tell it from the start. I can give you an exact location where this all happened, too. Deandra and I used to work at the County Line Market. You can find it easy because it's right on the county line, on a road called West County Line Road, which is on the corner of Wauwatosa Road. This was a long while back, like I said, almost 20 years ago now. These days, Deandra is a mom, married, and living over in Michigan, but we still keep in touch via Messenger. She laughed when I told her that I thought old Smokey the dog bear was a dogman monster, as he was always very sweet to her. Then I reminded her of how he acted toward me, and she stopped laughing. Now, this market is far more known for dragon sightings, as this here dragon is right out on the corner. We've also got a giraffe living there, and whatever that thing is. And of course, we have the king of beasts, Bigfoot himself. But I don't think giraffes, dragons, and Bigfoots actually live in this area. Now, Dogman? Dogman, I'm pretty certain, does live over there, or at least he did back in those days. So we had the Mequon Nature Preserve staring right at us from across Wauwatosa Road, and that's one of the places we thought the Dogman might be hiding out and subsisting. Actually, we called him Smokey because he walked upright like a bear. So he was Smokey the dog bear to us. We used to leave the store to take smoking breaks across the street to the south. We were smoking tobacco, nothing contraband, but we both still lived at home, and our boss knew one of my parents, so I wanted to keep it all on the DL. Anyway, in that area across the road to the south of the store was an unofficial natural area that we could hide out in to smoke. When we would be in there, Deandra would get approached by this dog that walked on his hind legs. He would walk right over to her like he loved her, and she would pet him. He would lick her face and turn around so she could pet all his favorite places. And he also liked when she would blow smoke in his face, believe it or not. Sometimes she would give him her candy, or part of her sandwich if she had one on her. I would back off a few feet when this happened because if I got too close, the dog would growl at me and stare at me out of the corner of his eye with a crazy, angry expression on his face. She and I would talk about him to the others back at work, and they would basically just not hear us. I took the photo to prove to them what was going on, but in that picture you really only see his face. It's hard to understand. He was standing up on his hind legs. People think he was sitting on a table in front of her or something, but no. He was about 5'10" or 11, and she was about 5'9" in her boots. So he was just a little bit taller than she was. Sometimes he'd rest both his arms on her shoulders and kind of hug her. It might have been heartwarming to see, except that he clearly would have snapped my neck if I'd gotten too close. Something about an animal wanting to end your story makes him seem less cute to you personally. I'm not certain why. So the day I brought out my cell phone to take that picture, I forgot to turn the sounds off on my phone first. It played a little audio file of a camera click that I had programmed in there, and you can see how surprised the Dogman was by everything I was doing. Trust me, in the next second, his face turned from one of surprise to one of anger and vengeance. He chased me away from Deandra and up a tree. I was hanging from a thick branch up in that tree howling, and that Dogman was hanging by his teeth from the seat of my jeans. Deandra tried pulling him off me, but that hurt worse than when he was just hanging there. Eventually, he gave up and dropped to the ground, then stayed there barking at me for a few minutes, making it unsafe for me to come down from the tree. It hurt to sit on the branch because my rear was now sore, so I was really not having a good afternoon. Deandra eventually lured the beast man away with some kind of snack, and I was able to jump down and make a break to cross the road and return to work, a little worse for wear, as they say. Well, that was the last of my trips into that land of green, and I can't remember anyone caring about the photo at work either, so it really wasn't worth the effort back then. I hope your audience has a better appreciation for it than my former coworkers did back in the day. I mean, I know that to me the answer is definitely yes, but I'm asking all of you. Did we photograph a real Dogman? Dogman versus Goatman. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I saw 2 cryptids one time, and I'm going to tell you about it. This happened when I was at my lowest point, but the experience gave my life meaning, and it's led to a lifetime of quiet study of cryptids. In my case, that means Goatman in particular. And not just the Popalik monster, which I believe I witnessed battling the Dogman, but also the 3 other legendary Goatmen that exist in places like Maryland and Texas. In fact, Texas has 2 different Goatmen. One of them isn't even a goat. He's the ghost of a man. But as I've indicated, the Goatman I survived witnessing was the one on the train trestle in Kentucky. When I had my experience, I think I had heard of Bigfoot, but I wasn't a fan of cryptozoology or anything. I was not at that bridge to see the Goatman, so what I saw was completely unexpected. The Dogman I saw was not like a werewolf in the movies, at least not the movies I've seen. It was a wolf that was as big as you or me, maybe bigger, and it stood up on 2 very sturdy hind legs. Its paws were unlike normal animal paws, and to me they kind of resembled fists, at least in the way he was using them in this encounter with the Goatman. He was just about as tall as the Dogman. Let's say they were 6'8" or 9 at the tops of their skulls. Then the Dogman had his pointed ears on top of that, and the Goatman had 2 long, dangerous-looking horns. He looked kind of like Pan, but less human. His face looked kind of like a dark goat face, but he stood and walked upright on his hind legs, reminding me of the devil himself. I'm going to go over every detail I can remember in order, but I got to tell you about the Goatman legends first, because they really blew my mind when I read them. There are actually a bunch of different Goatman legends from various places in the country, and they have such strange overlaps that it gives me the creeps. I mean, why are they so often associated with bridges? And why are they so often associated with trains and train tracks? The one I saw was literally on a bridge with train tracks when I saw it, for instance. Let me briefly explain each of these different legendary real American monsters to you, and see if it doesn't give you the creeps as well. Another Goatman you can find a lot of info about online is the one in Maryland. I actually took a trip to Bowie, Maryland, about a year or 2 before the pandemic, half hoping to see the creature, but really just wanting to see the places where the sightings took place with my own eyes. The Maryland Goatman, according to Wikipedia, was a legend that started some time back, but which exploded in 1971 when the death of a local dog was blamed on the Goatman. I find it of note that the Goatman preys on canines, especially in light of the battle I saw between one of these creatures and an upright walking canine in Kentucky. Apparently, in the 1950s, there were a bunch of dog killings in the region around Bowie, and they were blamed on the Goatman. On December 12th of that year, the Austin American reported that the remains of the dogs looked like they had been hit by what? By a train, of course. There is no response printed there from the dog owners to this claim, though, so I don't know if that's the truth or if it was an official lie to quell an upset public. Either way, there goes another train coincidence, or synchronicity, in Goatman lore. In fact, the image on Wikipedia of the location in Bowie in which the Goatman was seen is this, a photo of railroad tracks. This Goatman had two origin stories, like a Golden Age origin and a Silver Age origin. That's an inside joke for old school comic book fans. The original Golden Age origin was that the Goatman lived in a shack in the wooded region of Bowie, Maryland. The legends seem to center on the Goatman attacking cars with an axe right here on Fletchertown Road. Interestingly, the descriptions of the Goatman vary from being an old homeless man to being a Sasquatch with an axe to being a creature who was like a man on top but like a goat down below, like the great god Pan or a faun from mythology, but again, usually with an axe. The Silver Age origin of the Maryland Goatman was that he was a scientist experimenting on goats in the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center. His experiment backfired, and he turned into a half-man, half-goat who went insane and began attacking dogs and people with an axe. I looked into this story a bit myself and was stunned to find that when the research center later denied the truth of the legend, they admitted that they had been experimenting on goats at the time the legend was supposed to have taken place. Because of course they were. Again, the more you look into any of the Goatman legends, the weirder they all get. I've spent the rest of my life leading up to today looking for a chance to see any of the other Goatman, but I never have. Like the one they call the Lake Worth Monster. That's one I really wanted to see with my own eyes. That one happened 2 years prior to the Maryland Goatman, and the descriptions vary from it being a humanoid reptile, with both scales and fur, to being a white Bigfoot. It was supposed to have jumped out of a tree onto a car at Lake Worth. It was once seen by an entire crowd of people who chased it, like villagers in an old Frankenstein movie. When it picked up a tire and threw it at them, they got scared, and it escaped. This photo here was taken by a man named Alan Plaster in 1969, while driving past the Lake Worth Nature Center and Refuge with some of his friends at night. One of the women called out that there's the Lake Worth monster outside the car. Mr. Plaster had a camera on him, so he snapped the now famous Polaroid. Here he is many years later, pointing to the exact spot where the figure was when he snapped the shot. He joked that he didn't know what it was, but he felt it wanted to be seen. He wouldn't admit to being afraid of the creature, and he implied he thought it was just some kid pulling a prank. Then again, he made those comments a long time afterward in an article that I think was meant to promote the now annual celebration of the Lake Worth monster by the Lake Worth Nature Center and Refuge. So, who is to say how he felt that night when the Goatman, or a teenager in a white gorilla costume, was right outside his car? The other Texas Goatman is actually a ghost story, not a cryptid tale, so I'm mostly going to skip that one here. You should check it out though if you have time. It's a very tragic story. You know, there's real-world tragedy attached to Goatman legends more than you sort of expect concerning so-called urban legends. Now, the Goatman I literally saw with my own eyes, existing in physical space and time and not in my imagination, is, according to legend, able to hypnotize people into walking out onto the tracks, where he can chop them up with his axe. He is both a real creature and a symbol for the strange allure and pull that seems to exist on railroad tracks in general, and those railroad tracks in particular. How do so many people and animals end up sacrificed to this railroad god? It should be something that's easy to avoid. Don't lay down on the tracks. Lay down 2 feet over next to the tracks. Of all the places in the world, how do so many living things end their stories apparently lying down on railroad tracks? Easy answer. The Goatman lured them there, hypnotically. It makes total sense as allegory. It makes no sense at all as a real living cryptid that's supposed to be half sheep and half goat, yet somehow all man. Even so, my eyes told my brain that they were seeing just exactly that. Although granted, I did not witness him holding an axe. Another very strange thing about my sighting was that I myself was not lured out onto the tracks to witness it. The Goatman was not luring me out there with his strange eyes. He was focused on much bigger game than me. He had his eyes locked onto the white glowing orbs of a North American Dogman. Now, when I happened upon those railroad tracks which changed my life forever, I was only 22 years old. I did not know about the Goatman or the Dogman. I was out in the woods alone, wearing the first beard of my life, hiking until I felt sane enough to return to the human world. I had thought I was in love with the woman of my destiny and all that, and I was working 2 jobs to save up, to buy her a ring, and ask her to marry me. Then one day she called me on the phone and told me that she was leaving me for this other guy. When I asked her why, she went into a long speech about how much better his car was than my car. So I sold my car, bought camping gear, and set off for the woods in search of a reason to keep living. Please don't translate that into me looking to end my life. It is natural to think that since I was battling depression, and this is a story about a train trestle that has ended more than a handful of lives. Before I proceed further, I want to reiterate that last part. This is not a place to go legend tripping. These tracks are still in use today, and if you walk out onto that trestle, you might not be able to walk back in time to avoid being hit. Those trains are so long that they literally take over 5 minutes to pass. There was one person who managed to hang from the edge of the track for 5 full minutes, while the train shook the trestle and the ground violently. But his girlfriend did not live through that encounter on that same exact trestle that my story took place on. As recently as 2019, a 15-year-old girl lost her life on that track, looking for the Goatman. This is not a joke, and not something to mess around with. Whether you believe in the Goatman or not, I do not care. But I sincerely hope that you do believe that this train trestle is not something you want to walk out on, or even get too close to. If you want to see it, there are countless gorgeous views of the thing you can have from down below, and on all sides. But please, whatever you do, stay away from that bridge itself. So there I was, the younger me, hiking in the woods, and I came across train tracks. They weren't marked with a neon sign explaining that they were the now famous Goatman tracks, though, so I was not initially impressed. I looked to my right, and I saw the tracks extending into the woods for some ways. I looked to my left, and the tracks extended out onto a bridge that seemed incredibly high in the air. I had to get a better look at that, so I could figure out where I was on my map. I was using a paper map in those days. I did have a cell phone, but I don't remember if it had a map on it. It was before the iPhone, so probably not. Anyway, I was looking at the paper map, and not really looking out at the trestle. It was fairly dark in the evening, but not quite night yet. Between the oncoming darkness and my focus on the map in front of me, I did not notice what was happening on those tracks. In fact, I heard it before I saw it, and I put the map down to gawk in surprise and wonder. I will try to remember my initial impressions. I've read so much about both Dogman and Goatman over the years that my research will probably influence what I'm about to tell you. Remember though, the person I was when I saw this didn't know the words Dogman or Goatman. The younger me was a complete virgin to the idea of cryptids besides Bigfoot, and even that I wasn't sure I really believed in. I had not yet at that point spoken to any Bigfoot witnesses, and I did not know if such a thing could possibly be more than a legend. So I looked out on that trestle in the dark evening, and I saw two apparently real, seemingly physical, humanoid figures facing off against each other in the dark on that bridge that was not meant to hold pedestrian traffic. Even from where I was, I could see that in between the train tracks was nothing but air, and a drop so deep that no living thing could survive it. To go out on those tracks made no sense to me, and yet it seemed to me that two men were out there, and they seemed to be engaged in battle. Now obviously, I was a very young, very emotional kind of man. I got out my flashlight and called out to the two men, telling them that they were both unsafe and going to fall. When my flashlight landed on them, they both stopped what they were doing and turned to look at me. I could clearly see in the light of my flash that these were not men. Oh, they stood up like men, on two legs, but they were still not the same as us. These were some other kinds of creatures, and I didn't know what I was seeing. One seemed to be a bear with legs too long, and when he turned around, his face looked like some kind of a wolf. Not an ordinary wolf, though. Some kind of a monster wolf from the age of the dinosaurs or something. Like a giant cave wolf, with teeth that looked like they could bite through stone. The other one was even sicker looking. It was like a man with horns sticking straight up out of his head, straight into the air. Some people asked me if he looked like Hellboy, but no. He was more of a silvery color that looked blue in that late sunset sky. I think he was covered in a thin coat of whitish or silvery fur, and it was a little thicker in some places than others. His body was largely like a man-sized Bigfoot, but the legs were like a sheep's legs. The face was a lot more human-looking than the Dogman, and that was kind of an upsetting thing for me to see. I turned and ran back away from them and up into the woods, praying that they would return to their own fighting and forget about me. I don't remember how long I ran, but I was crying too hard to continue at some point. I couldn't even see anymore, and I had to stop, hide myself between a bush and a tree, and just cry as quietly as I could until I got it out of me. I was still shaking all over, convinced that both of them were going to come and find me. I remained in that spot until the sun came up, and then I hiked all day exhausted, trying to put as much distance as I could between myself and that train trestle. As I was about to set up camp, I found myself close to a highway with a motel on it. It really was not in my budget, but I opted for the hotel anyway. I wanted to be inside that night, so I could feel safe again and stop shaking all over. The looks of both monsters staring right into my eyes had been more traumatic than I can describe to you. And when I later learned that the Goatman is supposed to be able to hypnotize you with his eyes, I realized that I might have only survived that encounter because of 1. My attention was split between the Goatman and the Dogman, and 2. I turned and ran before the Goatman could hook my consciousness with his stare. Even though I did not personally experience his alleged power in this area, I feel somewhat certain that he can do the things people say he can do. I really do feel that if it had been only me and him, that he would have commanded me to approach him. And then if that had happened, my name would be listed among the victims of the Goatman on the Wikipedia page for the Pope Lick monster. It still gives me shudders to even think about it. That motel had a restaurant downstairs and a little internet lounge. Those were the days before they had Wi-Fi in your room. Instead, they had a little place downstairs that served coffee and bakery items where you could pay a certain amount per minute to get on an old PC and look at the internet or check your email or whatever. They were really only around for a few years, so I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I started looking up that region on the internet, looking for monster stories. I did not find out about the Dogman that night, but I did find a page talking about the Pope Lick monster. I learned that Trestle goes over a river or stream or something called Pope Lick, and there is supposed to be a goat man or sheep man that carries an axe and chops people up who get too close to him. Mine didn't have an axe, and I saw nothing at all about the dog-headed tall bear I'd seen walking on his hind legs. It took me years to connect that figure up with the Dogman, but now I can't see who else it could have been. And I also later learned that the Goatman supposedly preys on dogs more than any other kind of animal. To me, it all clicked into place then. I do have a theory about what I saw, and I would like to, if I live long enough, retire to Kentucky to research the monster and its legends. I want to either prove or disprove some personal pet theories of mine. If the Dogman were to enter Goatman territory, I would expect the Goatman to view the Dogman as food. But the Dogman I saw looked quite capable of defending himself. Would the Goatman be able to prey upon the Dogman? Would the Dogman prove victorious? Would the two fight to a draw, and both be forced to withdraw to either side of a dividing line in the turf? I am wondering if there is enough information out there to figure out what the turf lines of these cryptids might actually be. Do either or both currently exist in Kentucky? If so, it's something I wish I could put boots on the ground in Kentucky to research right now. But I'm just a guy who needs to work my job to support my family. I can't go running off on research expeditions, unfortunately. You know, more of the history disappears every year. Every day. I hope there's enough still in existence by the time I can afford to look into this, that I can add something to the field. If and when that happens, I would be proud to put my name to this. Until then, though, I better remain anonymous, so that I can continue to pay my family's bills. Now would not be a good time to start being considered controversial, as we've got one in high school, and another about to enter college. And neither of those kids, young adults, would even exist if I had not survived my terrifying encounter with Dogman versus Goatman. Fuzzy Lou joined us just last night. Now they get uncensored frights. Please welcome brand new channel member Fuzzy Lou from the UK. Fuzzy Lou now gets to enjoy our secret uncensored stories by looking at our members only posts and clicking on the secret links. If they joined at $1 more per month than their current level, they could also have access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman archives. We come out with a new members only story each Sunday, and you can join for as little as $1 a month. Nobody messes with me and my werewolf husband. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I like your videos about them rich white women that got themselves werewolves for husbands. What you may not know is that this has spread to communities of color as well. I was the first African American woman of my generation to marry into a werewolf family in all of Michigan, as far as I know. One of my girlfriends is taking the plunge soon with her wolfman boyfriend, so I'm not going to be the last. I never personally knew anything about werewolves before, as it was mainly a European thing, from what my man and his friends tell me. Now I am finding ways to mix my lifestyle with his and create our own unique culture. If and when we have kids, I want them to think of themselves as the first people of a new kind of human being entirely. My children are going to have lives so much better than my life, and I'm looking forward to that stage of our adventure. But here I am getting ahead of myself, telling you about my dreams of the future. What you want to hear about is my past, and how I got to be the wife of a millionaire werewolf businessman. One of the reasons I am writing this to you is because it absolutely makes me ill that my husband has to hide his identity as a werewolf. That's his stronger side, in my opinion, and he has to hide it due to narrow-mindedness in the business world. Lots of folks don't even want to do business with you once they learn that you're a werewolf. These straight-ass mothers think that werewolves are gonna eat them. Why would they show up to do business with you if they're just gonna eat you? Don't make no sense, some of these people. So I'm writing this to start to break down the barriers people have in their head about accepting werewolves as just another kind of person. It's only a lifestyle, and it's not a choice. If you're a werewolf, you can't get an operation to change that. It's who you are, and if people can't let you live out your true identity, then that's on them, not on you. I keep asking my man why he won't go public about being a wolfman, and he asks me if I like our fancy home. He thinks that we'd lose everything if the world found out that he spends part of his life as an upright, walking, fur-covered dog monster. I say people would just be jealous, and they'd eventually get over it. I dream of being able to take him out with me. I know we'd be celebrities, and we'd be walking on the red carpet. He thinks he'd end up in a zoo or on display in a museum or something. He ain't got no faith in humanity, but I can't say that I blame him for that. So before I met him, I was dancing with a band. I probably should tell you who they were because you would be impressed. But you also might be able to figure out who I was then, and my husband wouldn't like that. Personally, I would rather tell the whole truth, right now. But like my man says, I am not willing to give up our home or our lifestyle. So anyway, yeah, I was dancing on stage with a band, and that was how my man first saw me. I noticed him, too. He was the handsomest man in the crowd, and his clothes looked too expensive to be in that venue on that night. He kept staring at me, and I smiled back, hoping he would come backstage after the show. He didn't, but I saw him at 2 other shows, and he just kept staring at me. My friends thought this was creepy, but like I said, I could tell by his threads that this man had a wallet in his pants, and I can be very forgiving of a man with the long green. Now I have to tell you this completely different story that gets kind of scary. But just trust me, it ties back together later on, okay? So around that time, I started to wake up just before dawn in my bedroom with the feeling that I was being watched. I would sit up, look around my room, and not see anyone else in there. Then I'd try to get back to sleep. I lived on the 11th floor of an apartment building, the top floor, and I was always paranoid that someone was going to break into the building through the roof and come get me. So one night I woke up with that feeling again and look around the room again, and nothing. Nobody there. So I was about to try to get back to sleep when I heard a sound from outside my window. Like I said, I lived on the top floor, so there shouldn't be anything outside my window. I looked, and there, hanging out on about a 3-inch ledge, was a freaking hairy monster. It was a big, hairy Bigfoot with dark fur, and when it leaned its head down to look in the window, I saw that it had the handsomest wolfman face ever. This guy was muscular, like even his muscles had muscles. Even though he was covered in hair, he looked like a human man to me. In fact, he was the manliest man I'd seen since my daddy took me to some kind of fitness model show when I was a kid. This guy looked like one of those steroid freaks my daddy was a fan of, but this was an animal version of that, you know what I'm saying? Like a dog or wolf head up on top of a big muscle-bound body standing on 2 legs. He got hands, not paws. He's more man than he is animal, and he looked hungry, standing outside my window. Well, I wanted to scream, and I wanted to run, but the big, scary monster thing out there wasn't actually trying to make me upset at all. He, wasn't baring his teeth at me, or acting mean or anything like that. He was just sort of staring at me and looking me over, you know? I realized that he was hungry all right, but it wasn't for any kind of food. I opened my window to let him in, and I can tell you that is a human being in all the ways that count. In the morning, I was surprised to see that guy from the clubs sleeping next to me in my bed. It was that guy who used to stare at me, you know? I mean, I was surprised, but then again also, it sort of made sense. So it was surprising to learn how shy a werewolf can be. He's got all this shame about his condition that he needs to get over. He feels less likable because of who he is. But let me be the first to tell you that I love it. It's almost like getting to have 2 boyfriends without the trouble of cheating on anybody. So I work for him now, and I live in his place. And together, we are a power couple. Actually, he's got all the power, but I feed his confidence. When I tell him that he's the best, it matters to him more for some reason. I build my man up. I don't tear him down. He's even richer now than when he met me, and that's because I told him he deserves even more than he's already got. He's learned to trust me when I give him advice. Like, he used to have a partner, but I felt that guy was greedy. He was keeping 60% for himself, but the 2 of them had a deal that they co-owned the company. How can my man be co-owner if he's only got 40%? That's a serious injustice. And those who perpetuate injustice deserve whatever is coming to them. It took me months of convincing to make it happen, but one night, the werewolf paid a visit to the home of that partner. And by the morning, my man woke up sole owner of that shared enterprise. All that time, my husband kept insisting that his partner would never agree to a better deal. All it took was one visit from the werewolf, and he sold everything to us at a discount. Now my man had all this guilt about becoming sole owner, and that's because he's an emotional brother, and he needs his mama to tell him that it's all right. He's a good man, and now that there had been an business adjustment, he could do even more good in the world. I am thinking that we should move into politics, but so far my husband is resisting me. He's far too shy to run for office himself, so I've started to think that maybe I should be the candidate instead. I can just have my man help me, thin out the playing field. He's real good at convincing people to quit something that they might get hurt doing, for example. I've gotten real good at that too, now that I have my own personal werewolf to use as muscle. I've been told that we won't be the first werewolf couple to enter politics, either in Michigan or on a national level, and I guess that doesn't surprise me. I've heard there are folks like us in the music industry too, but I can't sing. I can only dance. I'm interested in hiring a manager to help shape and guide my career, but again, my man is not understanding the first thing about any of that. He likes to keep a low profile, but it's time for him to learn that I am not a low profile kind of a woman. I want to either be married to the first werewolf president, or maybe I just need to run for office myself. There's no way I'm not playing this up to be bigger than it started as. You only get one chance in life, and this is my chance. And I know that nobody can stand between me and success now, because nobody messes with me and my werewolf husband. Now, I don't want to braggy, but our EP today is Fraggy. Please join me in thanking Fraggy Dendron for making this episode possible. Fraggy is one of our $10 channel members, which means she got to see this weekend's all-new and uncensored members-only episode about a guy who found out where Dogman brings his, well, actually, I can't even talk about that episode here. Only one can win. Dogman versus Mothman in West Virginia. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I love the art you created for the incident I described to you, but I just want to point out that this happened at night. It wasn't at sunrise or sunset, which is what your image looks like to me. It was much darker. Also, I don't know if the Mothman had ears or horns or antennae, or whatever those are coming out of his head, but it was dark, so he might have. You got his red eyes and bat wings exactly right, though. It's fine to use that art as long as you include this email or write your own clarification. If this had happened to us when it was that bright out, we would have gotten some photos or video of the event. In fact, the entire story is about us trying to get lights on the two of them so that we could take pictures and become rich and famous. This story happened to me personally and features a Dogman, which I did not know existed here in West Virginia, and the Mothman, who of course everyone knows, has been flying around this part of the country since your late friend John Keel came down here to investigate in the 60s. I was with some buddies of mine who I had been friends with since we were kids, and we were around 18 or 19 when this happened. I can't ask them to include their sides of the story though, since they won't talk to me anymore. They've blocked me on everything, even their phones. They're mad at me because I don't believe the stuff that TV tells me is true anymore. They say that if you don't believe TV, then you're a Republic-crat or something. But I say anyone who believes TV in current year is probably insane. We stopped being friends by the end of 2016, and they have me blacklisted from working at a certain chain food restaurant that I used to work at with them. How do guys go from being your best friends to not allowing you to work because you disagree about, like, who to vote for? I thought that was supposed to be a basic right, to vote for whoever you wanted to once you got to be 18. Apparently, when you become 18, you have to lose your right to think for yourself, or else you don't have any friends anymore. So anyway, since I have no friends to distract me, let's jump right into what happened the night I saw one cryptid literally terminate another one right in front of my eyes. I meant to go take some pictures of the cemetery where this happened for your video, but I forgot. There is a Google Street View of it, but it's literally from 2008. It's older than my youngest brother, so the images they have are very dark and blurry. Maybe that's for the best though, because that illustrates the point I keep trying to make. We couldn't get a good clear shot of what we were seeing, because it was so dark in that night. And also because I think there's some quality to that entire area that somehow makes it harder to see. The air seems thicker over there to me, even during the day, but I'm not sure why I'm even saying that. It always seems to be dark and foggy, or at least misty over there, by that cemetery and the Lutheran church. But also next door and even up and down Route 17, at least in my opinion. Maybe there is some natural scientific reason that it always looks so misty and spooky over there. But in either case, it does look spooky. So I was borrowing my dad's car and Sally had his dad's car. His name is Salvatore, but we called him Sally. I had Jerome with me and he had Jared with him. And we were just driving around at night. We had seen a movie earlier, but at that point we were just enjoying being free and outside on our own in the middle of the night. This was still a relatively new thing to us, as like I said, we were just 18 or 19. When Sally cut around in front of me and slammed on the brakes, I had no choice but to stop quickly as well, otherwise I was going to slam into his rear hard and smash both our dad's cars up. In a second, Sally was out of his car and at my window. And before I could tell him what I thought of his stopping short in front of me, he was whispering and telling me and Jerome to get out of the car and look at the graveyard. I hadn't even realized where we were until he said the word graveyard. It's not a word I normally use. I say cemetery. Graveyard is more to the point though, isn't it? When he said graveyard, my mind was prepared to get out of that car and see a yard filled with the graves of previous generations of people just like me and my bros. What I was not prepared to see was that there was a battle going on in the murky darkness by two creatures that were not human. We all ran off the road to the edge of the cemetery, and there was an immense 7 or 8 foot tall bipedal man thing with a long extended face like a wolf might have. And it was battling this bird-type creature that must have been 5 or 6 feet tall itself, but had bat-like leathery wings, as large as a glider built to carry 2 people. Both creatures possessed an intense eye shine. The wolf-headed man seemed to have an off-white color to his eyes, but the big bat bird had huge round eyes, shining bright red, that reminded me of the red lights at an intersection. When I think back on the fighting that we were barely witnessing in that murk, I have to say that I don't think I would risk getting so close to the action if the situation ever presented itself to me again. The dogman or werewolf was picking rocks and things up off the ground and hurling them at the man-bat-bird, who all my buddies were immediately calling the Mothman. It looked like the dogman kept scoring hits, or else the Mothman was narrowly avoiding them as he constantly changed course up in the air. That's another strange thing about the Mothman, his wings, and the odd way they tended to act and react. Like I could hear the leather on the wings flapping sometimes better than I could see the wings themselves. They sounded like a ship's sail blowing in the wind, but actually seeing those wings clearly, black wings against a black sky, that was not so simple a thing to accomplish. So we were watching the dogman hurl projectiles up, and the Mothman swooped down to make attacks from the sky, and eventually, Jerome pointed out to me that the Mothman wasn't moving his wings to fly. What I mean is, while we could hear the leather of the wings flapping in the wind, the wings themselves were not moving. He was rising up and swooping down as though he were flapping his wings, but he was not. It was almost as though the giant wings were only for show, and that he was really flying or levitating off the ground using some other means. It's hard to describe to someone who hasn't seen it. One time it rose straight up in the air without flapping its wings, although the wind flapped them as it rose. There was one time when the Mothman did actually move his wings, and so we know that he could when he wanted to. This was not done in order to fly, though. We saw him flap his wings one time at the dogman, who was greeted with a gust of wind so strong that he slipped backward into a tombstone. So the wings were indeed powerful the one time we saw them used and moved. The rest of the time, they were more or less spread out and fairly stationary. I have no explanation for any of this. I am only trying to recall the details and report them accurately. I cannot explain some of the things that we saw. So we were trying to videotape what was happening, but you literally couldn't even make out the eye shine in the videos we shot on our phones. It was just darkness, and the sounds of us whispering to each other. Complete garbage videos. Sally had the flash on his camera on, but it didn't light anything that was that far away. That was when one of us got the brilliant idea to get back in the cars, turn them toward the action, and put the high-beam headlights on so we could get pictures and videos of the fight. I wanted to make $1 million. I felt like if we got footage on 4 cameras at once, of the dogman and the Mothman, that the 4 of us would be set for life. I mean, with the same scene shot from 4 angles at once, nobody could ever accuse us of faking it. Sally and Jared ran into Sal's dad's car, but the sounds of the doors slamming shut caused that Mothman to flip out. It stopped messing with the dogman at all and began swooping down on the road from above. Jerome and I were face down on the edge of the road, spitting gravel out of our mouths, as that birdman with the bat wings screeched painfully and swooped down repeatedly. I could hear Sally and Jared screaming like little girls when that thing flew down toward them, but I was too scared to make a break for my dad's car, so I'm not in a position to judge them. Forgotten in all of this was the dogman. Lying on the ground as I was, I suddenly felt him stomping out of the cemetery and onto the road past me. I knew he was approaching my friends in their car because I could hear them screaming again. I looked up, needing to see what was happening. The Mothman swooped down toward the car, and the dogman leaped up to grab it by the end of one of its wings. Swinging his arm hard, the dogman caused the man-bat to slam from out of the sky onto the road right next to my dad's car. When they collided, I could swear I saw sparks shoot out of the road, and I assumed that was caused by the friction of the Mothman hitting the blacktop so hard. The Dogman picked the slumped Mothman up off the road, and, with both arms, threw the creature over my head and back into the murky darkness of the cemetery. It landed with the sound of solid things breaking on top of some people's tombstones. This was when I saw the Dogman walk resolutely into that cemetery, and I got up to run to the relative safety of my dad's car. From there, I witnessed an absolutely incredible sight. That Dogman, with muscles like something from a superhero movie, was holding the Mothman down with one of his mighty arms, while the other pushed itself deep into the belly of the Mothman, pulling out handfuls and handfuls of wires. It looked to me like he was tearing electronics out of the bat creature, and there were sparks and pops going on all over the place. Was the Mothman some kind of a machine? Or was it merely carrying a machine that the Dogman was destroying? It was too hard to tell in such dim lighting. My former buddy Jerome thought it was a fallen angel, and that the sparks we were seeing were the light of God emanating from his belly as he exploded in illumination. I never went to Sunday school, so it looked more like an electrical disruption and a fire to me. But again, it was so dark and the situation so weird that I can't tell you for sure that Jerome was wrong or that I was right. At around that point, Salvatore turned his car to face the Dogman, and for a brief instant, he was fully lit by the headlights of that car. I do mean that it was brief, as the Dogman put his arm in front of his face, then ran off into the darkness to the side of the light. Rather than illuminate the entire cemetery as we had expected, the effect of shining the headlights caused one portion of the yard to be as bright as daylight, but this made the rest of it look even darker, just because of the way human eyes work. It would have worked fine if the creature stood still and posed for us, but it clearly preferred darkness, and it fled right back into it. What I did see in that split second, though, was a sight that returns to me every single day in my quiet moments, and sometimes at night in bad dreams. This was a dog with a crazy look on his face. Not crazy in a cute or funny way. Crazy in an absolutely inexplicable way. This creature was thinking things that I could not guess. It knew things that I would never know. How could I even begin to guess at its motivation when I was still trying to understand how it could even be real? So this crazy-looking dog got headlights shined on him. Then he covered his dog face with a surprisingly human-looking forearm. Don't get me wrong, it was just as furry as the rest of the animal, but I mean to say it was shaped like the arm of a well-muscled human male, just one covered in a thick growth of dog fur. That forearm was connected to a chest like that of a young Schwarzenegger. The torso narrowed down to being even thinner than the youthful Arnold was, as that was where the figure returned to looking like a canine. The legs looked as a dog's hind legs should, although they were somehow adapted to being the only legs on the creature. I didn't understand then, nor do I understand now, how its feet could look so very canine, while its paws looked like a wolfen adaptation of human hands. I'm not sure if it had 3 fingers or 4, but I know I saw what looked like a thumb. This was how it was able to grab the Mothman's wing and pull it out of the sky with one paw, because that paw was in fact a hand with an opposable thumb. How can such a creature exist? Yet I do believe that what the 4 of us saw that late night was in fact a living being of some strange sort. At least, I feel that way about the Dogman. As for the Mothman, I'm not so sure. I saw it torn apart, but there was no blood anywhere. I saw sparks instead. It seemed to be electric, unless Jerome is right and it was a fallen angel. Neither of us can ever really know, so it's not worth arguing the point, although it is a fascinating thing to sit around and consider. So, where was I in the story? Oh, right. Sally had his headlights square on the monster. Then it darted off into darkness and I got paranoid. I was like, I'm out of here, and I started the engine. Sally got just as spooked as I did, and the two of us took off together down the road. The Dogman ran out after us, throwing flaming and sparking parts of what I think was the former Mothman, if I'm not mistaken. One hit my bumper with such a sound that I started doing mental calculations about how long it was going to take me to pay for getting that bumper fixed. I also hit the gas hard because if one of those flaming and sparking bits of alien or government technology smashed through one of my dad's car windows, I was never going to be able to pay the repairs for that off. You know, it's kind of funny thinking back on it. I was less afraid of losing my life and more afraid of my dad being angry at me and punishing me. I drove my dad's car up over 50 miles an hour, but I could still make out that Dogman running after us in my rearview mirror. It hurled its final piece of sparking Mothman at Sally's dad's car and missed. Then the beast dropped to all fours, and you might not believe this, but he actually started to gain on us. I was going pretty fast, but he was able to equal and surpass that once it was down on all fours. Jerome was ranting and weeping and saying that this Dogman was a servant of Satan and that he would be able to outrun the car, and that Satan made his creatures stronger than God's and that the Dogman would never tire and that we were doomed and all this kind of stuff. He was saying all this like he knew it to be a fact, and I didn't know any better, so I figured, we're doomed. I was more scared than I had ever known I could get scared. That's how scared I was. I wanted to cry like Jerome was doing, but I was a bit too alarmed and panicked to feel sad just yet. I decided that if we were going to be dragged to hell for all eternity, well, it wouldn't hurt for me to make one last-minute escape attempt. I floored the gas pedal, and I became one with my dad's car. We went to our top speed. Then, the car and I were both rattling and shaking all over. I watched in the rearview mirror as the Dogman and Sally both faded into my past. The Dogman had finite energy after all. He was not supercharged by Satan to run forever, like the Energizer Bunny. He was very powerful, but he was limited, and he was a finite living creature. Not something supernatural, and not something paranormal. At least, that's how I feel about what happened that night. So the next morning or afternoon, we all went back in Sally's dad's car to look for Mothman parts to bring home. Neither car had ended up with any marks at all on it, and none of us got in trouble for anything at all. That was great because no punishment, but it sucked in a way because we had no proof that what we went through had even happened. So we searched the road, we walked through the cemetery, and we explored some of the brush around that drive, but we never found so much as a screw. It's almost like nothing that I've been remembering to you for the last 20 minutes even happened. But I can never forget that night. I saw the Dogman utterly thrash and ruin the Mothman, who may have been alien technology in the end. Unless our government can build robots like that. And if they can, why do you think they assign them to bothering West Virginia teens in the middle of the night? I know I saw it, but I'm not sure what I saw when I saw Dogman versus Mothman in West Virginia. Without Dear Joanne, there could be no Dogman. Please join us in thanking Joanne Maracle for making this episode possible. Joanne donated to us using our super thanks button located under each of our YouTube videos, and we're very grateful to her. You know, you can also join one of our channel membership clubs. Then when you donate, you can check out our weekly Sunday secret uncensored stories about Dogman. Like yesterday, we had a new members only secret episode about a guy who claims he found a cave that Dogman had been living and eating inside of. I'd tell you more, but it's not a story I can repeat on this channel without getting in trouble. If you'd like further clarification, don't worry. Here comes our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman, to explain the inexplicable. Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.